Hey, it's a NFL Week 18 preview with the playoff odds. Not as many playoff odds this week because you pretty much know what happens when teams wins and lose. It's the FTN Fantasy Schatz and Tanier NFL podcast. I am Aaron Schatz. You know me as that DVOA guy from FTN Fantasy. He is Mike Tanier, and you follow his Substack at miketanier.substack.com. Here we are in 2025. January 2nd, 2025, we are living in the future. And in the future, there are still Pro Bowl snubs.
There are still Pro Bowl snubs. I know people are very actively going to Pro Football Focus and trying to get some justification for their Pro Bowl snub articles.
I mean, I didn't look over all of it to get all this. My first check, because I'm obsessed with special teams, was leaving JT Gray off the team was massive to me. But then I noticed Zach Allen was not on the team, and then I decided that was the biggest.
Zach Allen is a pretty awesome player this year. I was doing the homer thing and saying Khalil Ringo has had a great year as a special teamer, but most snubs boil down to local fans saying, I know all the good players on my team and have no idea what has been going on all season with the Carolina Panthers.
Absolutely. Chris Rojas says, Happy New Year. Let's snub the Pro Bowl discussion.
Yes, let's move on.
Okay. Then we'll tell you instead that we're going to preview Week 18, mostly looking at the Vikings and Lions. But first, we want to tell you that we are brought to you, as always, by Underdog Fantasy, which is the easiest place to play fantasy sports and the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry, and a place where I won money just last week. And awesome. You can too. Head over to Underdog and they give you a deposit match with code FTN up to $1,000 extra, code FTN. You only got a week to go until the playoffs. There's lots of good times to play in the playoffs, so there's no one better to play with than Underdog Fantasy. So usually we do this in chronological order.
Yeah.
We are not going to do this in chronological order today. We are going to mostly talk about the Vikings and the Lions, which is the last game of the regular season, but the most important one of the week. And of course, don't forget, if you are watching us live, which we do at 11 a.m. on Mondays and Thursdays for at least the next few weeks, you can make comments and ask questions. What's your initial thought about the 14-2 Vikings at the 14-2 Lions?
Well, having ingested the Monday night game of the Lions against the 49ers, which turned into a bit of a shootout, turned into something that they kind of sweated through. My first thought is, why? Why on the road in San Francisco do you get in this game that's not decided until the fourth quarter, then turn around, which was totally meaningless. That was a meaningless game. Then get on a plane, come back to Detroit. It is a holiday weekend, so even though they practiced, it was all just walkthroughs and practices and short days rest and an extra, not as much rest as you could have had. Why go through all that when you are such a banged-up team?
Because Dan Campbell is going to Dan Campbell.
Yes.
And because his personality is what it is, and the aggressiveness is not just about fourth downs. He's aggressive in a lot of ways, and he wanted to go out there and prove they could beat San Francisco, I guess, after the NFC Championship game last year. And they did, and they didn't come out with anybody particularly injured off that game.
Right.
So that's good. But yes, they're going into this game now maybe a little bit tired, but they do have the home field advantage. And I'll remind everyone, the Lions won in week 7, 31-29 on a field goal with 15 seconds left. The Vikings came back from a 28-17 deficit at the start of the fourth quarter, missed a 2-point conversion, so they ended up with the 29, and then the Lions kicked the field goal. And that was back when most of the Lions were healthy.
Yes.
Hutchinson was hurt by that point.
Yes.
But most of the other Lions were healthy. The Week 7 game, after adjusting for opponent, is the 4th best game all year for the Vikings offense.
Okay.
And the 3rd worst for the Vikings defense, even after you adjust for the opponent, which suggests that this is going to be a shootout.
It should be a shootout, especially with the situation of the Lions. Lions injury reports, not much has changed. They may be getting linebacker Alex Anzalone back.
It sounds like they're not, but it's a possibility. And a lot of people have tagged the beginning of their defensive decline to when Anzalone went in.
Right. He was at their walkthrough. Dan Campbell said he was running around out there. I believe the Lions are practicing as we speak, so you might know more in an hour or so. But again, I don't think they're doing any full practices there. Anzalone would be a big comeback. They got Melanfalu back 2 weeks ago. I think that might have helped a little. Still unbelievably banged up. I don't want to go through the list. I was checking the injury reports of all these other guys, all these Marcus Davenport guys, Malcolm Rodriguez. None of them are expected.
Look how they're coming back. No.
And Aiden Hutchinson was running in a pool on Sunday, which is exciting if you're a 75.
Right. We already know Hutchinson is maybe the Super Bowl, but not until then.
He is not going to be there. So their injury report may be a little better than it was, but not nearly as good as it was when they faced the Vikings and got into that shootout.
Iceman says that Anzalone is the only Detroit linebacker who is consistently good in coverage. They've definitely showed the last couple of weeks Jack Campbell getting lost in coverage.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
And they had Quan Alexander out there for a while, and he was a mess, and he's hurt now. And Campbell is kind of a thumper, and Campbell's banged up. Campbell is going to play, but he's going to be playing hurt.
Now, it's interesting because Dennis Habig says he saw my tweet about Detroit against Minnesota today. What about the rushing game in the first battle and the expectations for Week 18? Okay. If you want to talk about rushing, one thing I found out was, according to adjusted line yards, the Lions are the worst defense in the league against left end runs, which happens to also be the weakness of the Vikings offense. I don't know if that's about who plays defensive end on that side or cornerback on that side, but they give up a lot of left end runs.
My big thought about left end runs, all I've got on this right now is if we get to the Super Bowl, the Ravens left end running is obscene. They love giving Henry a ball and run left end. Okay, that's for the future. But
if that's a Lions weakness and they play the Ravens in the Super Bowl, we're problems. Lions are better than the Vikings in adjusted line yards in both sides of the ball.
Okay.
Now, and the Lions' adjusted line yards have actually been pretty good the last few weeks. It's the long runs that have been a problem.
Right.
I also went and checked on the FTN Stats Hub specific running concepts.
Okay.
And both teams are big on outside zone and inside zone.
Yeah.
And both teams are very strong on defense against outside zone. But the Lions' defense is better against inside zone than the Vikings' defense is. So that could be a place where the Lions could get some yards, is the inside zone runs with Gibbs.
By the way, Aaron Jones was practicing or virtual practicing or walking through. Looks like Aaron Jones will be there for the Vikings. David Montgomery still not practicing, so it may be all Sonic, no Knuckles for the Lions.
The thing that I tweeted about was that the Lions are, despite the problems with their linebackers in coverage other than Anzalone, still first in DVOA against short passes this year. But they're 17th against deep passes, and in the first game, all of Sam Darnold's deep passes, except one, were complete. He had some big gains on deep passes, which are normally not completed at that kind of a rate.
Right.
And Darnold throws deep passes more often than the NFL average.
Right. And
look at the receivers he's got.
It's not like he's coming off a game where he completed about 37.
Naylor, for crying out loud. Naylor had a big one in the first Lions game.
Naylor and Jefferson had a couple. Hawkinson had one in that game. And, Addison was there. It's not like Addison wasn't doing anything. He had a touchdown catch. So, that's a problem. And, again, the cornerback situation is a mess. We talked about how they have energy. Carlton Davis is out. Also, healthy and expected to play, but banged up right now for Lions. Amick Robertson, calf limited, and Emmanuel Mosley was sick. Obviously, he should be fine. But, that's the level of depth we're talking about. Enos Rakestraw also out.
We've talked a lot. If you've listened to this show all year, every time the Vikings come up, I talk about how good Sam Darnold is against man coverage this year.
Yes.
Which, of course, is an offense stat. The receivers, it has to do with the receivers.
Right.
The Lions are fourth in defense in man coverage, but only 15th since week 12 when Anzalone went out.
That's significant. That's really...
And Darnold killed the Packers' zones, but he's only average against zone this season. But the Lions are the 31st defense in zone since week 12. So the Lions like to play man instead of zone. And if they play zone, they have not been good at it the last few weeks.
Right. Which will happen when you've got inexperienced linebackers who are meant to be thumpers, which is Campbell and Rodriguez. And you're having problems with inexperienced corners as well.
The other thing I'll point out, the Lions play more one high.
Okay.
The Vikings play more two high.
Mm-hmm.
And Goff is better against one high than he is against two high. Oh. A lot of these matchups, you're hearing the same thing over and over again, which is a lot of the matchup stats seem to favor the Vikings because they're good at what the Lions like to do. Mm-hmm. When you add in the matchup stats with the injury issues, I mean, I've been riding the Lions bandwagon. I've been loved the Lions this year. I've talked about it. I'm rooting for the Lions. I like the Vikings in this game. The funny thing about rooting for the Lions is most of the reasons I'm rooting for the Lions also apply to the Vikings.
Yeah, they are.
The Vikings have made Super Bowls, but it's been so long that it's just as fun and good for that. The only other is that I know people in the Lions front office that I would like to have them win.
Right.
But the Vikings would be just as much fun to have in the Super Bowl as the Lions would, honestly.
They're a fan base that are hungry for some recognition, for some respect, etc. So that's also a lot of fun. And part of it is the Lions are fun because of Campbell and the big man touchdowns and craziness and things like that. Whereas the Vikings, whenever we think about them, we've got 2022 in our heads, the fluky.
Yeah, but I think it's different. The Lions are fun because Campbell, and we love him wanting to bite kneecaps and stuff. Yes. The Vikings are fun because Jefferson is so amazing, and you just want to see Jefferson do amazing things. And they have I root for Andrew Van Ginkel, who's been an underrated player for a long time. And obviously the Sam Darnold narrative, if the Vikings make the Super Bowl, is incredible.
Yeah.
I like the Vikings. I like the Vikings in this game. I do.
Yeah, I'm going. The moment I woke up on Tuesday morning and saw how Monday Night passed, I'm like, why did we do this? I'm going with the Vikings. What is the over-under in this game? 56.5.
Yeah, I wouldn't play it. I know we expect this to be a shootout, but that is one high number. No. Michael Allen Brewer points out it's not just the battle for the 1 seed. It's the battle to see who the other NFC second place teams have to grumble about playing next year.
Ooh.
Because honestly, you don't want to have to play either Minnesota or the Lions next year, I guess.
That's another good reason the Eagles clinched that division.
One other point out I will make is special teams is a major Lions advantage.
Okay. Especially
on punts and punt returns. Now, there probably are not going to be a lot of punts and punt returns in this game, but that is the Lions do have the Lions are one of the better special teams units, and the Vikings are 24th. So that is an advantage to the Lions. But I think we're both in the same place, which is that we look at the matchups and we look at the injuries, and I feel like there's a better than even chance. The line is Lions -2.5. And I feel like if I had to bet this game, I would bet Vikings money line.
Vikings money line, which, by the way,
it's probably plus 120 or something.
You're exactly plus 124. And just look at the last month. Look at the last 6 weeks. Look at the impressiveness of the Vikings wins in the last month. Look at the Lions' somewhat wobbliness, including a loss there that they probably shouldn't have taken. And the difficulty they had dispatching teams like the Bears. Vikings look like the better team right now. And look at the IRs.
I mean, this is something that I don't know how predictive it is, but I will point out the Lions are a little bit worse than usual when you get into late and close situations, and the Vikings are a little bit better than usual when you get into late and close situations, which is part of why maybe some of those games have been harder to win than you would think for the Lions.
Yeah, I don't know how predictive that is. Watch that one for the Commanders. A big late and close, oh my God situation many times this year.
Okay, so we're going to go backwards now and talk about the 2 Saturday games. The 2 Saturday games are the Browns at the Ravens at 4:30 and the Bengals at the Steelers at 8. And And BG8 asks about, do we predict the Ravens matching up against the Chargers or the Steelers?
How does it work out?
Personally, I think the Steelers will be visiting Baltimore. And I believe this is why the second game matters, even if the Ravens win the first game. Because I believe if the Bengals beat the Steelers, and remember the Bengals are trying to get into the playoffs, that the Steelers then drop to the 6 and would have to go to Baltimore. Whereas if the Steelers win the game, the Steelers are the 5 and they go to Houston. Although I think this also might depend on whether the Chargers win or not.
Yeah, I got it. This stuff really perplexes me. Everyone wants the Texans. Everyone wants the Texans if they can jockey into that position. And it would be between the Steelers and the Chargers to get the Texans.
Right.
Although the Ravens could end up if there's
the line. We're not going to talk much about the Browns and the Ravens. The Browns did beat the Ravens back in week 8, 29-24, based primarily on the fact that the Ravens went 2 for 10 on third down and 0 for 2 on fourth down.
And
I don't think that's going to happen again.
And dropped 3 interceptions, one bouncing out of Kyle Hamilton's hands right before like the game-winning touchdown drive ensued by Jameis Winston. Also, Jameis Winston was in that game, and you know what time it is on Saturday?
It's Bailey Zappi time.
It's Zappy Branigan time. That's right. It sounds like he might be rotating with DTR. DTR might be packaged, DTR might be packaged and shipped somewhere. I'm not sure, but it looks like it is Zappy time in Cleveland.
The line in this game is 17.5, and I'm not going with the Ravens on it, despite the fact that the Ravens are number 1 in DVOA and the Browns are 32nd. And here's why. First of all, 17-mile-an-hour winds.
Yes.
And second, Josh Johnson and the likelihood that the Ravens are leading something like 27-3 at halftime and just pull everybody and play Josh Johnson and backups in the second half and let the game come in within 14 or whatever.
In fact, I'm thinking of just taking the Browns as a chaos situation, quarterback making his first start, and really looking at the under. I believe it's 41.5. High wins. The chance that it's like it's 22-3 and everybody just stops. So I'm looking at the very likelihood of an under in that game.
Big Cheese says, why are the games not inverted? Why do the Ravens go first? And I believe that the reason the Ravens go first is because if the Steelers went first and lost, the Ravens would have nothing left to play for.
Okay.
Whereas if the Ravens go first and win, the Steelers still have to play for seeding, and the Bengals are still trying to get in the playoffs to get like at all.
Yes.
So the Steelers-Bengals game matters no matter what happens in the other game. Whereas if the Bengals beat the Steelers, the Ravens game would not have mattered.
And they want the better game in prime time. Keep the Browns away. Let's see Joe Burrow. Steelers, here's a stat, 4th against wide receiver ones. And Jamar Chase in the first game had only 6 catches for 86 yards and a touchdown. 44-38 was the score of the first game between the Steelers and the Bengals. Good heavens. Yeah, that's the Bengals defense for you when we start talking about 38 points for this.
Yeah, Lou Anarumo has lost some of his shine this year.
Captain Lou.
The other thing I noticed, here's the Bengals offense by DVOA. 4th when tied or behind.
Okay.
15th when up by 1 to 8 points. 27th when up by more than a touchdown. The running game, I don't know, it's Chase Brown, whatever. The running game is bad. They're not good at running out clock.
Right.
So games stay close even when their defense is not right. Their offense is scoring and scoring and scoring. The defense is giving up points. The offense slows down when they try to run clock. Games stay close.
Right. And then the defense goes out there and is the defense. Isn't that great? By the way, Chase Brown did not practice, got hurt late last week. He has been much better than their other running backs. So
yes.
And
Khalil Herbert is the backup.
Yes, Khalil Herbert is the backup. He's not a bad back overall. I think he made a couple of plays last week.
People always liked him in Chicago.
Yeah. He was always the backup running back who's better than the starter, who isn't really better.
He never became the starter.
Right. The Alexander Madison.
They would give runs to Dante Foreman or something rather than starting her.
Dante Foreman may be starting for the Browns on Saturday. Also, Sam Hubbard Trey Hendrickson has just made the Pro Bowl on merit. Sam Hubbard is their number 2 pass rusher, theoretically. Hurt his knee on that big man touchdown against the Titans a couple weeks ago. Has not played since. Did not practice. Hendrickson has 14 sacks this year. The rest of the Bengals combined, 18 sacks.
What Hendrickson has done without a lot of anybody to take attention away from him is very impressive.
Yes.
Special teams, I will point out this is another game with a big special teams gap. Pittsburgh is the number 1 team on special teams, and in particular, they are the best punt coverage team.
Ooh. And
Cincinnati is poor against Cincinnati in punt returns. Mm-hmm. And unlike in the other game, there will be punts.
There will be punts.
I don't think we're doing 44-38. I think Pittsburgh's offense is not. Pittsburgh is going to have to punt a couple times. And there's also a big gap, obviously. Boswell is the best kicker in the league this year. Evan McPherson may be back healthy, but may not be.
And he was slumping before he got out. And the wind is heavy in Baltimore. Wind report isn't as high in Pittsburgh,
but there's a small chance of snow.
So it's going to be cold. And Pittsburgh weather is often kind of similar to Baltimore weather, so keep an eye on that. Games in Pittsburgh.
The line is Bengals -1.5.
I don't know. Them playing with their hair on fire, I kind of dig it. I kind of dig the Bengals in this one. I feel like
I would kind of stay away. I guess if I had to pick it, I would pick the Steelers, but I guess I would stay away.
And of course, you have to wait and see who's playing for what. You should wait through the first game. Yeah. So both teams should have something to play for, but just keep an eye on the spreads.
Let's be honest. I know everybody. I know Pittsburgh would want to win. They would want to take on Houston. Mm-hmm. But it's not as important as winning the division.
But you might get a bargain. You might get the spread might move a little bit, and it's like, well, I still like the Steelers. You might get a bargain. So look for that.
Okay, Sunday games. 1 p.m. is mostly not important, except the NFC South.
This makes it worse. That makes it worse.
So Saints at Buccaneers and Panthers at Falcons. Now the Buccaneers again. So both of these teams, the home teams, are much better.
Yes. Both
of these teams lost. The better team won the first time. They both played in week 6. Buccaneers beat the Saints 51-27 with Rattler at quarterback. The Falcons beat the Panthers 38-20, although that was Andy Dalton before Bryce Young came back and started playing better. But in the last couple of weeks, Bryce Young has not been playing as well. And so the Panthers are still a bad team with a terrible defense. It seems, listen, it's the NFL. Anything happen. You remember 2003 when the 4-12 Cardinals, all the Vikings had to do was win that game, and the 4-12 Cardinals had a touchdown to Nate Poole at the end of it happens. But I feel very confident about both the Buccaneers and the Falcons, which would make the Buccaneers NFC South champions.
Right. The Buccaneers, I think, a couple of injury reports for the Buccaneers. Antoine Winfield's still out. Jamal Dean also on the injury report. That's both their starting cornerbacks. He did not practice. Both of their tight ends, Cade Otton, who's been huge, really took over kind of for Chris Godwin, is hurt. So is Payne Durham. I think Otton is out for this game. A couple other ones to look at. Bucky Irving and Tristan Wirfs were limited in practice.
Check out what Payne Durham is worth if you like playing DFS. And I think if you play DFS in week 18, you are probably insane. But Payne Durham was pretty cheap last week, and he's the number 1 tight end now for Tampa Bay.
He's hurt, so watch out.
Durham is hurt now, so screw that.
Right. So this could squeeze things for a little bit for the Buccaneers. I'm not doing a Saints injury report because, dear Lord, we don't have time for this. I will point out that everyone on the Saints is injured, but somebody returned to practice this week, Chris Olave. Now, I get the impression, I don't think Chris Olave is going to go out there with this bunch of subs and play. It was his 21-day practice window. I think he's just getting out there to get out there, but that's worth noticing. So I am a little nervous about the Bucs on that side of things because of the size of their injury.
Michael Allen Brewer wants to know how different the last few seasons and coaches would have been if Baker Mayfield had gone to Atlanta instead of Tampa Bay.
Oh, gosh. That's
Well, here's the one thing I want to point out, which I think people have tried to dismiss from their brains.
Okay.
Kirk Cousins was pretty good the first few weeks of this season.
Correct. Not week 1, but like week 2.
He definitely did not have the mobility, but from about week 2 to about week 10, Kirk Cousins was pretty good. And then he went into the tank.
Yes.
Right? Then he started really having problems. But the idea that we can go back and be like, oh, Kirk Cousins was a problem all season, he wasn't. He was very efficient for a few weeks.
I'll call you on that one as well. Baker Mayfield took over Tom Brady's supporting cast last year, and for the first 6 or 7 games was not good. And then kind of went on a tear where everything was a 3rd and 10 completion to Godwin and Evans. Then he has really picked up this year under Liam Cohen, who is a very, very good offensive coordinator. So yeah, there's a lot of variables in place. I don't want to go back and mess with the time stream on that level.
I am a very big believer in not betting on week 18.
Okay.
But if I had to, I would go Buccaneers minus 13.5 and Falcons minus 8.
Well, I never bet on the Falcons, but I'm not laying 13.5 right now on the Buccaneers. I have a funny feeling they're going to struggle. They're going to get that win, and they're going to come away.
But you think it'll be closer than the 13.5?
Yes. When they don't have Otten, they don't have Durham, and then they're struggling at cornerback, they're going to face more of a challenge than they anticipated.
I didn't even bother writing down the lines for the 4 p.m. games.
I have them. If you want to.
I have my notes here. It says brief discussion of the 4 p.m. game.
Okay.
Right? Because, listen, strange things happen, and it'll be fun to play let Carson Wentz, and it'll be fun to be like, hey, who's the backup defensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs? But, I mean, I would say the Broncos have an 85% chance of beating the Chiefs backups in this game.
Yes, and I don't think the motivation will be super high on the part of Chiefs. Obviously, they'll be out there to win, but if Andy can put a 3rd stringer out there to make sure the Broncos are the team in the playoffs and not the Bengals, he might. I just went back and checked a little bit. The Chiefs rested their starters in 2021 and lost 38-21 to a very hungry Chargers team that year with Chad Henne at quarterback for the Chiefs. But I believe they won when they rested their starters last year against the Chiefs again. But the Easton Stick.
It was the Easton Stick Chargers.
Yeah. So you can't really base anything on that. Usually you get a competitive Chiefs team even when the backups are out there.
Big Cheese says, someone explained to me why the Chiefs are the line is Denver minus 10.5.
Yeah.
Why are the Chiefs getting 10.5? And the answer is because they're playing their backups and Denver's trying to make the playoffs. And Denver is good.
Yes.
Denver is a good team this year.
I could take the Chiefs plus 10.5.
And there is, I think, a little bit of sense that the Chiefs would perhaps lose this game on purpose.
Yes.
To keep the Bengals out of the playoffs.
That's it. I didn't check if they activated their 3rd string quarterback. They might not. They don't have to until Friday. They could pull Carson.
Yeah, Chris Oluokun is
ludicrous. They could put him out there, and they've done that in the past. They've had the 3rd stringer go out there for part of the game.
And the other game that we're watching at 4 p.m. is the Rams. Seahawks at Rams, but Jimmy Garoppolo starting. The Rams have decided that they do not care if they get the 3rd or 4th seed.
Are we sure this is not just another attempt to rub things in the 49ers' face? We're sending Garoppolo out against Jay.
If you think about it, it makes sense because it's likely that the 5 and 6 are either Detroit and Minnesota or Green Bay. Does it matter which of those teams you play? Not really.
Oh, I'd want the Packers against other than the other choice. Give me the Packers over the loser of Lions-Vikings.
Well, the Rams have decided that they would rather rest. So the Rams are going to start Garoppolo. So, what are we going to go deep into the matchups of the Seahawks defense versus Garoppolo? I don't think so.
Please no. Yeah, McVay, he's very rest oriented. He rests his players throughout the entire preseason, et cetera. So that does track.
And then the big game at night, which we already talked about, which is the Vikings and the Lions, and then we'll be back here on Monday to review it all and get started on the playoffs.
And Black Monday.
We'll have to see who's fired by the time we come on at 11 a.m.
Okay, I'm calling at least Peterson, maybe Dable.
Yeah, and they get fired. They often get fired like Sunday night.
Exactly,
it's really Black Sunday night.
Yes, well, we will know. We will know Peterson on Sunday night. Shad will not wait on that news.
All right, that does it for today's show. Thank you to everybody who is watching. Thank you to everybody who is listening. And of course, like the show, tell your friends about the show, subscribe to the show. We will be back Monday at 11 a.m. for Black Monday for beginning of a playoff preview. Until then, enjoy this weekend of games. He's Mike Tanier. I'm Aaron Schatz. So long, everybody.